Hi gang, the joy of football today is intense.
It's very intense, and we start with comparisons featuring heavily a famous player who is leaving these shores. We're featuring also in They Used to Be Giants, a club that's just won promotion back to the Premier League.
Three of the best, young player, old player. We go round the clubs: Brentford, Chelsea, West Ham, Crystal Palace, Ipswich, Brighton. And then we follow that with Letter from the Gantry, and Martin is going to Goodison for the farewell.
And we've got the voice of passion, which is Neil. But I have to say, I nearly matched him today. We actually agree about something passionately.
And finally, Stoppage Time, the moment that was the biggest surprise of the season and the biggest, I thought so, of the season. Subscribe, Patreon, our Substack.com site where Martin and my writings can be found under The Joy of Football. Let's go. The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for Xavi! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football. Hello, the Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett, comes to you today. Well, let me tell you, the last segment, Voice of Passion, is about intensity, and we're going to keep that up all the way through to that last.
You especially.
We start with comparisons, and we're going to compare three samples of football. The first one is Trent Alexander-Arnold with Jonathan Woodgate, who I believe was the last English defender to transfer to Real Madrid. He was a surprise choice by Real Madrid because he was always injured and he'd had problems in court as well, of course.
He was a very good player, Jonathan Woodgate.
Yeah.
Very
He
good
didn't
player.
play in his first season because of injury. When he made his debut, he scored an own goal and got sent off. And in the 3 years he was
only
there,
get better after that, couldn't it?
It didn't really for him. He played 9 La Liga games in total, so it was just a disaster. But maybe some Real Madrid supporters will be thinking, hello, another English defender.
I don't think so. They're not comparable as players. You've got a very strong centre-back. Jonathan Woodgate, I remember commentating on a Youth Cup final when he was with Leeds and they won the Youth Cup very emphatically against Crystal Palace. He was one of the stars. Paul Robinson was in goal. Harry Kewell was playing. It's that kind of era, you know.
We got a Leeds theme today.
He was destined for the top. And I suppose that move was a real high point. It didn't pan out, and that can happen. There are lots of reasons. Injuries is a very important part. Fitting into the dressing room, learning the language, believing that you can adapt to the overriding culture. You can't change anything for your benefit. You have to not meet them halfway. You have to meet them full on, all the challenges. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. For Trent, I'm sure, with Jude Bellingham being there and that sort of friendship, I think, is important to have somebody there. I guess I haven't obviously looked at the squad when Jonathan made his move, but there probably wasn't somebody that he could actually relate to necessarily. So it was a bit of leap of faith and a leap that had not a soft landing, sadly, for him. But we all wish Trent well. I know he's upset a lot of the Liverpool fans by the way he's done it, to go on a free. And now we've got this issue whether he's going to be released by Liverpool in time to play in the Club World Cup, which you and I will find out because we're going out there. But I think it's a shame that there's going to be a little bit of a scratchy ending to what's been a wonderful contribution from a local lad, you know.
Absolute Liverpool legend. I mean, Woodgate was a strange player to look back on. I thought in the 2000 and noughties, England had 4 players of centre-backs of world-class quality: Terry, Ferdinand, Woodgate, and the player he finished up after leaving Real Madrid, partnering in club football, Ledley King. But Woodgate injury prone, and Ledley King by that stage not training because he was carrying such a bad.
Am I right in thinking he scored the last winning goal for a trophy for Tottenham?
Woodgate in extra time against Chelsea. Thank you very much, Martin Tyler, in the League Cup final.
I
of
knew I was
2008.
right in saying it. It was just prodding the beast here.
Jonathan flipping Woodgate. But both fit for that game and both played the full 120 minutes. I seem to remember. But I mean, Alexander-Arnold's just got to stay fit, and he'll do better than Woodgate. But right, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Kieran Trippier, who of course went from Tottenham to Atletico Madrid. He also had his troubles. He got a 10-week ban for gambling while he was out there, but he won La Liga. Last time Atletico won La Liga.
Yes, a much more relevant comparison because although Kieran's older than Trent, they have been in competition for England places at right back. I think it did. Kieran's a very strong-minded person. I mean, there was that, you might have been there, that Youth Cup final when he was at Manchester City when he was injured very early on and still staggered back to get his medal when they won. And I thought, yeah, you're made of stern stuff. Then, of course, he had to go to Burnley to sharpen up his act.
Martin's being really horrible today because that was a Manchester City victory over Chelsea in the Youth Cup final. Chelsea's first Youth Cup final it was 2008 and it was since 1961. So it was not a good night. Yeah.
No, but it was a good night for Kieran in the sense that he was on the winning side, of course, but that toughness was apparent as a teenager. And
interestingly, didn't make it at Manchester City.
No.
And in central defence, two players alongside him was Ben Mee, who also didn't make it at Manchester City and went on to have a top-class Premier League career.
They played together, of course, didn't they, at Burnley? So, yeah. I mean, Kieran went later in his career. It was a bold move, and I think it worked out very well for him. Of course, he's come back, and there's still life in the legs. He's now a trophy winner with Newcastle, which will carry, may I suggest, even slightly more weight than winning La Liga, simply because of the 70-year gap. But I mean, both are outstanding achievements for Atletico Madrid.
Well, not to forget, his final game at Tottenham was the Champions League final of 2019. I mean, he has had a sterling career.
Over 50 caps, scored in a World Cup semi-final. I mean, goodness me, there's lots of boxes been ticked. Trent's obviously won pretty much everything, hasn't he, going there? So, he's got maybe a different sort of tempo to his career. Everything started very well, and he took it on immediately from there, whereas Kieran's had to work his way up, rather like anybody in a work of life where you get promotion through excellence, really.
And the interesting thing as well is they've got a lot of the same qualities. Trent's faster. He's got more pace. But they both like to take a set play.
Love to take a set play. Yeah.
They both like a goal. And probably Kieran Trippier is a more solid defender.
But he's older, and I think also he's a more solid person in the sense that, he's got those years. He's served his time in that. So he's I can't tell you how hugely he is recognised as a leader in the Newcastle setup. He hasn't always been in the team. He's had a few injuries recently, but he is back in the team, and I have to say, you almost feel that they want him in the team because of his other qualities as well as a footballer.
And for people like me especially, but you and me, always stops and gives an interview post-match. I mean, never a problem.
Very chatty.
Yeah.
And he will often tell you that he's sort of had a difficult career with his family because they're all Man United fans, I think. And so he's sort of been swimming against that particular tide.
I saw probably his worst ever game. Do
you think this is appropriate setting to talk about his worst?
Yeah, I do, because it was for Newcastle at Everton, and I think the score was 3-0 to Everton, and Newcastle, and he was at fault for all three goals. So when he walked out, at Goodison, which you're going to talk about in a minute, Goodison Park, as you walk out of the dressing room, you have to pass a little enclave where the journalists who are allowed to go and do the post-match interviews are. And he came out, and I thought, he's not going to talk. Not even Kieran Trippier talks after a game like that. Yes, he did. And he admitted his errors and said he was in a bad spell of form and needed to cope with it. Top
honest, yeah.
Top honesty.
A great career. And Trent, with all, of course, he's got all the medals, but I would like to think that he'll become that kind of person where he's recognised not just for his football skills, but for his maturity as well.
Yeah, and he's set up projects in Liverpool.
Yeah, he's well on the way to that. But as I say, Kieran, you only get that seniority when you're a senior citizen, really, in football terms.
Final comparison: Trent Alexander-Arnold and Danny Carvajal.
Carvajal, probably with a B. They probably say it with a B. But
he's 34 next season, January. One of 4 people, I think, to win 6 Champions League European Cups, starting with Gento, the Spanish winger of Real Madrid in the 1950s, and Modric.
And was in the prime form last season, one of the players in the... I know there was a bit of an issue about the awards as far as Real Madrid were concerned, and they weren't necessarily talking about him, but maybe they should have done.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
He's a truly outstanding player. And I was at the Champions League final, which was great for him and for the club. But then he's been stricken by injury since, so obviously that's why they've been looking for somebody to play at right back. Lucas Vazquez is actually talking about Trent being an attacking right back or even playing in midfield. Lucas Vazquez was a right-sided midfield player. He's been moved to right back to play quite a lot this season, hasn't he? So that kind of style of football, I'm sure it will suit Trent down to the ground. And if he strikes up an on the pitch friendship with Jude Bellingham as well, that can only add to the chances they have of bouncing back. I mean, this season they've got to bounce back next season, haven't they? So
the extraordinary thing about Carvajal is Real Madrid put their faith in him and keeping him when Hakimi was coming through and lighting up Europe, and all the big clubs were going for him, and he was Real Madrid's player, and they made the decision to stick with Carvajal, which at the time I thought was a bit weird, but they haven't half been justified in doing it.
He hasn't done bad, Hakimi, though, has he?
No, I mean, you call him probably arguably the best right back in the world at the moment. But Carvajal, when you look
fit right back in the world.
When you look at his record, I mean, has really done it all.
And then what he did, I know it's a couple of years ago now, but the World Cup with Morocco, it was sensational.
Hakimi, So Carvajal is a much more defensive right back than Trent. So it will be I know that Lucas Vazquez and Fede Valverde's played there quite a lot this season, would be more attacking, more Trentish, but it will be a real change of philosophy having Trent.
I know it has upset people on Merseyside the way it's happened, but I think we should all wish Trent all the best. I mean, David Beckham wasn't a sensation at Real Madrid. Michael Owen certainly wasn't. You mentioned Jonathan Woodgate. And Jude Bellingham, after a stellar start, has sort of found it slightly below that level and is learning about the pressures of playing for that in that wonderful all-white kit. So I wish Trent well. He's certainly, I'm sure, as time will heal the wound over the way that he's left. If many Liverpool fans seem to be feeling that they've been cut by it, people will come to recognise what an outstanding a player he's been for Liverpool, and that really he's added a dimension that maybe at times when the trophy is one that he's actually set the team apart from the opposition with his quality.
Yeah. And everyone in football knows football clubs don't do loyalty. They just demand it.
I still think the only Trent end in football will be at Nottingham.
Hey! We have to live with these little ones. Right, we move on.
Puns.
And we bring back this week, they used to be giants. Leeds United, back in the Premier League with Daniel Farke. I grew up with Leeds United being dirty Leeds. I always say that I'm a child of the 60s, so I'm a kind of old hippie, and I believe all that peace and love crap, and I just believe it all in this ghastly world.
You weren't like, I was a teenager in the 60s. You weren't that.
No, I was a child of the 60s.
You were a child.
So it was all the culture
you didn't
that...
appreciate all the philosophy of the times. Then really, you were too young.
No, all that anti-Vietnam stuff and all. I was into all that.
I wasn't talking about that.
I was into all that, and so I don't do hate, but I do hate Leeds. I just hate Leeds. I mean, I'm a Chelsea man. I hate Leeds. Manchester United. We got 2 Manchester United people here. They wouldn't remember the great Leeds, but do you hate Leeds? Yeah. We all hate. Well, let me give you this, Martin. Leeds came into a force in the mid-1960s. 1965, they were league runners-up and FA Cup runners-up. Everybody was thrilled that they didn't win anything, apart from Leeds fans. And by the way, if you're watching or listening, Leeds fans, I know you hate me because you got a song about it, but I actually love you hating me, so cool. Keep listening. 1966, league runners-up again, Intercities Fairs Cup semi-finalists. 1967, Intercities Fairs Cup runners-up. They were the team that couldn't quite get through. 1968, Intercities Fairs Cup winners, League Cup winners. 1969, League champions. 1970, League runners-up, FA Cup runners-up to Chelsea, European Cup semi-finalists. 71, Intercities Fairs Cup winners, League runners-up. 72, FA Cup winners, League runners-up. 73, European Cup Winners' Cup runners-up, FA Cup runners-up, famously to Sunderland. 1974, League champions. 1975, European Cup runners-up. 1982 relegated. That was kind of the end of that era.
Yeah, the Fairs Cup was the forerunner to the UEFA Cup. Yeah. The younger listeners won't have any idea about that. It was a major trophy.
Yeah, it was.
And as to get into the European Cup, you had to be champions.
Yeah,
which I think many of us would like to see back as far as the Champions League or retitling.
No, the Champions League is brilliant. So
it should have just the champions.
No, the joy of the Champions League is unmatched. Managers.
What was wrong with the European Cup then? Because Chelsea couldn't get in it.
No, what was wrong with the European Cup was that outside of the top 4 or 5 leagues, it was very weak. The UEFA Cup, which had the 2nd, 3rd, 4th teams of the big countries, the big leagues.
I hate to say this, Neil, but you may be right.
It was a better competition. Right, managers of Leeds in that era. Don Revie was the great manager, 1961 to 74. He left to manage England. Brian Clough was there for about 2-3 months, infuriating all the Leeds players.
Or something,
Jimmy Armfield took over 1974-78 and got them to the European Cup final, and then it all went downhill. Jock Stein was there for a few months. Jimmy Adamson, who was captain of Burnley when they won the league in 1960, 78 to 80, and then they went back to the players of that great era. Alan Clark, who took them sadly to relegation. They came back, Leeds, got back into the top flight in 1990 with Howard Wilkinson as their manager, won the league in 92, and that's it. League Cup runners-up 96, UEFA Cup semi-finalists 2000, Champions League semi-finalists 2001, but that's it.
Well, that's not bad, is it? That's a lot better than some of the teams we said they used to be giants and perhaps weren't. Leeds certainly were, because I went to work for Yorkshire Television in 1976. I had 5 very happy years there. The only problem was that the television studios were in Leeds. We had 16 clubs under our umbrella for the regional coverage, only one of which was in Leeds United. But the other 15 all thought that the Yorkshire Television were paid-up members of the Leeds United Supporters Club. So I was constantly harangued with, "Oh, you've come to us this time, have you? Leeds not playing today," which it was very unfair because it was a very democratic process about which games we covered. And Leeds would then, Jimmy Armfield was the manager. a lovely man, a gentle manager, but with a strong playing pedigree.
Former England right back.
One of England's great right backs, yeah. And he was trying to recreate the sparkle of the Reeve years, you know. And that was very difficult. They didn't win as many trophies under Don Reeve as they should have done.
No.
One of which, of course, was seen to be a corrupt.
Well, it was a referee who allowed a goal against them when someone was yards offside, claiming that he didn't interfere with play.
Oh, that was that was the game against West Brom, I think.
Yeah, in the final game of the season.
Tony Bomber Brown, yeah.
Yeah,
but there was also the European final was very questionable as well, wasn't it? When the forensic journalists got their hands on what happened, so bad luck with some of it. They weren't popular. Actually, I have to say, Neil, a lot of those players were still there when I went to cover Leeds games and work for Yorkshire Television as a young commentator, looking almost in awe to what these guys had achieved. They could not have been more welcoming. I'm talking about people like Paul Reaney, Peter Lorimer, Trevor Cherry, Paul Madeley, Norman Hunter, who was still there for a little while. Billy Bremner was still there for a little while. They moved on during my time there. But I couldn't have asked for, as somebody had sort of, obviously in local television coverage, there was a lot of relation between the club and the television studios. And in fact, on Friday afternoons, we recorded our preview show, and the players would come in because they were stuck. If they lived outside Leeds, had to come into a hotel on the Friday afternoon to train on Friday morning, stay and then play the game at home on the Saturday. So they come in they weren't always on the show. They just come in to watch, have a chat, and it was very convivial and for me very educational as well. So. That I've got a real smile thinking back on those years. After that, I left in '81 to join Granada, and then John Helm took over for many years, still broadcasting. John, fantastic guy, and he had 1 year with them, and they got relegated. So they were still in the first division when I left.
Why do you think they have fallen so far? I mean,
well, they've had the Peter Ridsdale, who was a man of very good intentions, I have to tell you, but couldn't quite get the balance sheet right. I mean, when you think of the year 2000, they were in the Champions League, they were top of the Premier League.
They were signing goodness knows how many English youngsters, and it was like, if you were English and not bad, they signed you for ridiculous money.
Well, I don't know about that, but they certainly punched above their financial weight. And I can remember them getting knocked out of the FA Cup at Cardiff, where Sam Hammam was the owner and stood in the crowd behind the goal. It was a pretty tough atmosphere, Cardiff fans and Leeds fans. And that was around the early New Year, where they were. I think Leeds were top of the league when they went into that cup tie in the third round of the FA Cup early in January. So they've had their periods. They did well. Bielsa's years are something we should talk about. The joy of football. Goodness me, we did talk about it in Murder Ball.
Yeah, well, he changed the attitude to Leeds completely. He actually made them liked.
Yeah,
because even the '92 champions under Howard Wilkinson weren't loved, but sort of because they were so.
I should remember that Howard's the last Englishman to
win the league.
Win the league. Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about one game. This would have been in 2000, the year 2000. 2001, and I'll tell you what happened. It was just after 9/11 when America got terrorized with the bombings in New York and in DC. And about 2 weeks later, Chelsea were playing a UEFA Cup game in Tel Aviv, and it was questionable whether it would go ahead because of the world politics. It did go ahead. A lot of Chelsea players, they were given a choice of whether to go or not, didn't go. We lost, came back to England, and I think the following midweek went up to Leeds in a League Cup tie. And Leeds hadn't won anything since '92, but were arguably the best team in the land, as you were saying. And they thought they were going to destroy us because of the split in the camp, if you like, that had been shown by those who didn't go to Israel. And we went up there, we won 2-0. I think Eidiger Johnson got both goals. And the shock and despair in the home crowd at the end of that, not because it had been one of their sworn enemies that beat them, but because it was now 9 years since they won anything, and they felt that this team needed to win something. That's what I got from that. And they didn't win anything, and they've not won anything since 1992. And I think they're in the same boat now as Newcastle have been in, of a giant who needs to win a flipping trophy.
Yeah, but Newcastle would be the first to admit that obviously the ownership change has helped that, even though they've been restricted by the financial regulations. There hasn't been a cash splash, that's for sure. But Leeds need to get it right.
They need to get the ground right.
The ground is exactly the same, it seems, when I went there for my first game.
It's now
but it's a fantastic. I mean, 5 years working for Yorkshire Television, the Yorkshire people were just salt of the earth. Brilliant. No wonder they think it's another country, really. And when we were doing games, if there was a Yorkshireman playing in the opposition, we had to feature him. He was always in the post-match interview of the opposition when we'd get the Yorkshireman out to come and talk. It was that kind of together. It's like a bit like the Geordies, of course, with Newcastle as well. So, but I have a soft spot for Leeds because of the time I spent there, and I'm glad to see them back. I have to say, just on one game, you pick one game, the game way away from the early years was when they had played their first game in the Premier League under Bielsa. They lost 4-3 at Anfield. And what a game it was. There was a slightly iffy penalty decision that went Liverpool's way, and they came close to getting something. And there were clearly the good days under Bielsa were less frequent in the Premier League. And obviously there weren't enough of them in the end, but the fact is that the good days were very good.
Welcome back, Leeds. We all hate you. Right, we move on. 3 of the best.
I'm still getting over that last one. I don't hate Leeds.
3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
3 of the best. He's made them pay. And that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
If you're enjoying this, subscribe. If you're not enjoying it, you probably won't be here, so it doesn't matter. Right. Thank you. Keep going. Young player, old player, player. Martin, who's your young player?
Well, I'm picking a player I've never seen play in the flesh, actually. Michael Coyote of Brentford, who's on loan from Fiorentina, came in the January window. He's 20. He's a rapid right back. We seem to have a lot of right back themes going through the program today. He undoubtedly has got a lot of potential. I think it's an option to buy at the end. So I'm sure from what Brentford have seen so far, that option will be taken up. I can't speak with any great knowledge on that, but looking at what we've seen from him, he's got the capacity to overlap. He set up what turned out to be the winning goal, the decisive goal against Manchester United recently. And the other thing about him is he's got a long throw.
Brentford.
Yeah, but it's not just Brentford that are doing long throws. Almost every game that I've seen in recent time, everyone's got a long throw. And Bournemouth, of course, scored against Arsenal from a long throw from
Everybody scores against Arsenal from long throws.
And it was a real sort of Parks goal, wasn't it? Throw it into the middle, and the defender, the attacking defender, the attacker, as it turned, the centre-back, Dean Howson, just headed it in. I mean, that's kind of thing you don't expect to see in the Premier League, especially not against a team like Arsenal, who are very good at their set pieces, attacking, but also at defending of them. And I've seen Palace... Chris Richards has got a decent throw.
Yeah.
They use that as well. So I think it's coming back into fashion. But I've got to mention one person who you won't know. Some of you might know, but you'll know the name. Merson. Sam Merson, son of Paul. 30 years old. He's had a good-ish non-league career. And played at teams like St Albans at a good level. He's a central striker. He's slightly different to his dad, but he looks like his dad, that's for sure. And he takes a mean penalty. He's been playing for a club called Hanworth Villa, which is near where the Mersons are based, I think. And there's another brother who's there as well. There are a lot of Paul's children dotted around the country. But he has got the longest throw I've seen outside the top game. In fact, he's better than better than Chris Richards to start with. It's in the capacity of Semenyo. He puts it into that area. They've got to the semi-final of their league, one of the Isthmian League regional divisions, and so they got to playoffs, the playoff semi-final. In the second minute, they got a throw. Sam came across and took it, hurled it in, and they scored from it 1-0, and they won 2-1 the semi, but they lost in the final, unfortunately for them. They were punching a bit above their weight to get to that level. And but I was standing behind. He came back almost. I was just leaning over the railings, that kind of ground, and so he almost ran in front of me, hurled it in. And yes, maybe you expect at the lower levels it to be more effective, but that was in the week leading up to Semenyo doing it at the Emirates, and Coyote doing it effectively in the game against Manchester United. So it's a sort of link to that. A young player, a lot of potential, in the right club, I'm sure, to develop that potential. But he's only joining a trend. He's not starting one. Michael Coyote.
Nice. My young player is Reggie Walsh at my Chelsea. He became last week in the away game in the UEFA Conference the 7th Chelsea player aged 16 to represent the team. Came on for the last 3 minutes of the game and got stoppage time as well. He's an attacking midfielder with an eye for goal, good creator. He came on and he had a wicked shot after about 10 seconds, which the goalkeeper had to parry. I mean, he couldn't stop it. So he came on and nearly made a big name for himself. But my real point of interest, in the reason I bring him up, is that he's the third youngest ever. The two younger ones, both from the 1960s, a striker called Ian Chico Hamilton. Chico Hamilton was a jazz musician, and so he got nicknamed Chico, Ian Hamilton. He didn't really make it at Chelsea, even though he scored in his debut at Spurs.
He played for Villa, didn't he?
He played over 200 games for Aston Villa.
Yeah,
he was
a fun guy.
And died recently, the late Chico Hamilton, and the late Kingsley Whiffin, who had just one game, a goalkeeper. So Chico, 16 years, 138 days on his debut. Kingsley Whiffin, 16 years, 157 days. And Reggie Walsh, 16 years, 193 days. But of course, when they made their debuts, the other two, they started and played the whole game. Now, I look at the 7 players who made their debuts aged 16, and only 2 of them didn't start. And they're the last 2, Reggie Walsh and Michael Woods, who's, I think, still playing in non-league football, who got a couple of nasty knee injuries early on and never quite broke into the big time.
He came from Leeds,
From Leeds, yeah.
He did.
We nicked him.
There were two players came together.
Yeah, Thomas Taiwo and Michael Woods. Yeah, we nicked him, and Leeds weren't happy, and we were going for 3, and we didn't get the third one, and that was Danny Rose, who went to Tottenham and had a stellar career and played in the Champions League final.
Yeah.
But
I think Michael Woods played when you interviewed me, Neil, after Walton and Hersham for Alan Dows's testimonial.
He did.
Yeah. And Brendan Rodgers very kindly, after a game had been postponed in July because of a thunderstorm, brought the team back again, and we played. And Scott Sinclair, who also went on to have a fine career, scored the equaliser. But they were boys against men. We were the men.
But my point is, 7 16-year-olds have played, and the last 2 just played a few minutes. And I do wonder whether it's worth it. I do wonder whether you don't need to start a game to feel a first-team footballer. And this idea that you throw them in for a few minutes to get a taste of it. Of course, it's a joy for them to get those few minutes.
He's very lucky to be on the bench. Goodness me. The reason it hasn't happened so many times before is that there were only 3 subs or 1 sub. And in Chico Hamilton time, probably no subs. So they are lucky to have even an opportunity. They've been nowhere near the first team if there wasn't all these subs allowed. Nowhere near it. So take the positive out of it that he's got a couple of minutes. It might be the only couple of minutes he ever has. I understand that, and that's the point that you're making, really. But he's had that. At least he can have that. And it would not have happened until we went to 9 subs, 5 of whom can go on. And 12 subs in the European competition? You have 12 subs?
Most debuts bringing in young players now are off the bench, and I question whether that is intelligent.
You can't.
I question whether football. I don't think you're doing this intelligently.
You're not there. You're there to win matches.
I know.
Simple truth.
Yeah.
And if you win matches, if there's a young player, if there's a certain... I've been with the Woking Academy all season. We've had 2 players get 10 minutes in the nation. It's called the National League Cup, I think, which is a new competition against the under-21 teams of Premier League. And played Southampton.
Another good competition for under-21.
Yeah, they get in. And it counts as a first-team appearance.
Yeah.
But it isn't really, because you want to play some league football. That wasn't a league game.
No.
So the other 2, the 2 youngest ones were league games. Were all the others league games?
They might have been cup games, but mostly, yeah. Anyway, well done to him, and you will see him again.
And it's nice to have a Reggie in the team.
Yeah.
We're looking back at this time of the calendar, aren't we? We're looking back to the days of the Toms and the Robs.
Your old player.
Yeah, you're not going to like this. Enzo Maresca. Because you spent a lot of time in our 60, are we 60 yet? Not quite.
58
podcast, berating the fact that his teams always blow up towards the end of the season, and that he's not the right man for Chelsea, and that the system is wrong. And
I am that harsh.
You are.
Just philosophy.
But look, I'm looking at it totally as another club in the vista of observation, if you like. And I think Chelsea have done very well to get to where they are, pushing hard for a place in the Champions League, which they didn't get last season. So that if that's achieved, that will rubber stamp the fact that I'm giving Enzo a bit of a plug here. He's obviously there's not that much competition. You've talked a lot about that in the European Conference League, but they're in the final all but they're playing the second leg of the semi-final. And the management of the different squads and getting players game time, and also bringing back in players. Maybe, I know Caicedo's been made everybody's player of the year for Chelsea, but moving him about, that's a tactical tweak that he's been responsible for, and getting the best out of some players that haven't really been maybe totally showing off their A game. That's the expression these days, isn't it? The better version of themselves. That I hear that a lot now, who have come through. And thinking of the Enzo Fernandez goal against Liverpool was a beautifully worked goal. Right, there were defensive problems from Liverpool to let it happen, but it was beautifully taken by a player in whom a huge amount of, I'm talking about Fernandez and Caicedo, didn't come cheap, but they weren't going in the right direction. Now he's got them going in the right direction. The team seems to be a bit more together. Of course, it's a bit hit and miss. It isn't Liverpool, because Liverpool's consistency has made them what they are, runaway champions. But I think, given what could have happened, with all the uncertainty about, do the owners like each other or not, I think he's done I've met him a couple of times, which I think I have the advantage over you in that respect. And he's not an extrovert. He's a very thoughtful man. He's a family man. He basically puts football in its place and then goes away. He told me a lovely story. I hope you won't mind me repeating it, when they'd lost a game and I happened to be at the training ground and saw him. one of his children had said, "You should have played so and so," and he said, "I've been listening to this. I'm not having my family telling me how to pick the team," with a big smile on his face, you know. So
I think it's also worth remembering with Maresca that he was an attacking midfielder who came to the Premier League at a very young age, turned his back on Serie A.
Yeah, some great photos of him as a West Brom player.
Yeah, come through at West Brom. He then spent a long time in La Liga. So he got around, and of course, for many of us, he'll forever be a hero for scoring twice against Middlesbrough in the final of the UEFA Cup in 2004, when Steve McLaren was the manager, and I would think it was Mark Schwarzer in goal for Middlesbrough that day, I think, and scored twice in the 4-0 victory. Was it Atletico? I can't remember which team.
Yeah,
I can't remember who it was who beat Middlesbrough, but
Mark Schwarzer would have been in goal, I'm sure. Steve McLaren's team.
Yeah. So
but he, you know, he's it's a hot seat, but he's coping with the heat.
Yeah,
and if they get the Champions League, I think
then he's done his job.
If they don't, then I think what you've been saying all through the run of the podcast is possibly the truer version of it.
Yeah,
but
if Chelsea get in, he's done his job.
Yeah.
Helped by the fact that possibly that there'll be 5 teams in it.
Yeah, but listen, you can't,
and even possibly a 6 if the Europa League as well. So.
Yeah.
My old player is Dean Ashton, centre forward. Last Saturday morning, I was sat in this kitchen doing some work and didn't watch on TNT Aston Villa versus Fulham, and I had it on Talk Sport. And Sam Matterface did the commentary, and Dean Ashton was the co-commentator, or as they say in the States, for anyone listening in the USA, colour commentator. And he is a player that I don't think gets talked about enough from the past. When he went to West Ham from Norwich, it was when Alan Pardew was manager of West Ham, and they got promoted back into the Premier League. They got to the 2006 FA Cup final and robbed in the last minute by a Steven Gerrard wonder goal, which made it 3-3, went to extra time, and Liverpool won on penalties, I think. But Dean Ashton was the centre forward there, and he got himself into the England squad, and he'd have been about 23, 24, that's all then. And I thought, as someone who supported an opposing team but was also a journalist, I thought he was a top player. And if I had to describe him in terms of current players, the one I probably think of the most would be Harry Kane, in that he was a footballer who scored goals rather than simply a centre forward. But he was very physical, nevertheless. I thought he had everything, Dean Ashton.
Well, like Harry, he served his time in the lower divisions, and he was at just one club, Crewe, I think, and then played with a guy called Rob Hulse, who was very much rated as well. They were a really devilish partnership together.
And he went off for England. He was going to win his first cap, and he got injured in training from a Sean Wright Phillips challenge. Poor old Sean, it always gets mentioned. I've never seen it. I've no idea whether it was good or bad, but he was at Chelsea at the time, so I knew all about it at the time from him. And he never recovered. He played again, and he moved on, but we didn't move on. He stayed at West Ham, and then he retired at the age of 26. And I think not only West Ham, I think it badly affected them and badly affected that team, and I don't think they recovered. So it wasn't just him who didn't recover. I don't think West Ham recovered in that era. And I think it affected England, because I think we didn't know. He did win one cap much later on, but I think that was almost respect for a fading fitness. Dean Ashton was becoming a top player, and now I'm delighted to say he's a top co-commentator.
I've worked with him, and he's very good. He lives in Norwich. He's where he obviously had some of his playing time, and he's a very independent man. He's not anybody you have to worry about whether he's going to make it to the game on time, and that's part of the role of being a co-commentator, or indeed being a commentator. He's very self-sufficient, good bloke, tough break, as you say, and I'm glad you picked him out. He deserves a mention.
Player.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of Crystal Palace. I did their semi-final against Aston Villa. And although 3-0 looks comfortable, it was only comfortable because of some very good saves by Dean Henderson, who I want to give a mention to because he seemed to have been destined for the top. Although I actually said in my commentary of the league game against Nottingham Forest, the thing about him is he looks like an outfield player, not knowing, but I did a bit of extra research knowing we were going to talk about him today, that he could have been an outfield player.
Really?
Yeah. And he was also a fine cricketer as well. So he's got that sort of athletic build, but it's unusual in a goalkeeper is that he at times it looks as though he lacks a bit of presence in the penalty area because he doesn't quite have the massive size of some keepers, even the sort of the breadth. And but he's obviously came through at Manchester United, looked as though maybe he expected to be the successor to David De Gea. It didn't work out that way. He had loans, Sheffield United, Nottingham Forest, who we've just played against, and that was curtailed through injury. But he finally found a home at Crystal Palace. And then don't forget, he's had to see off another England candidate in Sam Johnston as well, who was at the time. So that looked an interesting competition, which he's won. I think finding a home seems to be important to the way he's playing. He looks every inch a top goalkeeper now. And he's won 2 caps 4 years apart, which sort of tells you about the up and down life that he's had, really. Back in 2020, then when he came on as a sub against Republic of Ireland, and at the back end of last year he was capped again. He got a start this time. So it's all going in the right direction. He's 28 now, which is still quite young for a goalkeeper. And I think his best years might even be ahead of him.
Yeah, well, I think he's been prone to error all through his career, and that's why he never quite made it at different clubs, particularly Manchester United. And I think he is having by a mile his best season, and I think he's arrived, which is great.
Yeah, right place, right time, and maybe the right coach as well. Dean Kiley, a very experienced goalkeeper coach and keeper himself, of course, for many years. He's under his wing, and I think that's helping a lot, and you can see it every game.
Nothing personal, but fingers crossed you have a great cup final, Dean, and you put one over Manchester City. Right. My player is young enough to be my young player, but given my young player is 16, he's quite old, really. Julio Enciso of, owned by Brighton, but on loan at Ipswich. A couple of years ago, and as a 19-year-old, he scored an absolutely wicked winning goal for Brighton at Stamford Bridge. He is someone who scores a miracle goal every season, but he didn't just score a miracle goal. I think he was a substitute. He came on and he changed the game. He is, I think he's Paraguayan, isn't he? But he's a number 10. And he is just gifted and extraordinary. He ruptured his ACL, his cruciate ligament, anterior cruciate ligament, and coming back from that, he couldn't find what he had. He couldn't find his rhythm, couldn't do anything. So Brighton loaned him out to Ipswich. He's been poor. Whenever I've seen him, he's been poor. But in the latter stages of the season, it's like something has come back, some fitness, something's gone right. And we've talked about this before, and I keep talking about it, having worked inside football for so long, that people don't realise how long it can take players to get over injuries sometimes months, sometimes years. And you can suddenly at 25, 26 rediscover something you had at 23 because you finally overcome whatever the problem is. And it was interesting recently when Kevin De Bruyne said, I've had pain for 18 months. It's only in the last 6 weeks I've been able to train without pain. I don't know what Enciso's situation is regarding his body, but 2 weeks ago, or however long ago it was, he opened the scoring, his first goal of the season. he scored at Stamford Bridge again against Chelsea to put Ipswich in the lead. And it was a poacher's goal in the 6-yard box. And then, of course, he scored at Goodison Park with another Enciso worldie, as I call it, his annual worldie. and an absolutely extraordinary strike. I actually feel that of the 3 relegated clubs, Southampton, Leicester and Ipswich, I don't think Southampton and Leicester have ever shown any Premier League quality at all this season. I think that Ipswich are just beginning to. It's taken them this long to settle. If the season was this long again, I think they might have a better chance. Well, they'd have a better chance of survival. I think they're just finding their way at last. And one of the reasons is him. And if he goes back to Brighton next season, I think we can look for Julio and Cisse to pick up where he was when he was 19. That is my player of this week. Right, we move on. And we've still got to come Voice of Passion. I hope you have endured the intensity as opposed to insensitivity, which I keep reading when I look down here. We go on to our wonderful Letter from the Gantry by Martin Tyler.
Letter from the Gantry.
As always, thanks, Neil. I've recently been asked to cover Everton's goodbye to Goodison Park on Sunday, May the 18th for the Premier League's World Feed. The farewell fixture is against Southampton. Now, every game needs plenty of research beforehand and focus and concentration during, but this will be more than a football match. It will be a very emotional event. I might start with the backstory. In the 8 years before Everton moved to what has been their base since 1892, their home was Anfield. Yes, that Anfield, which was left vacant after a dispute over rent. To fill the gap, the owners created a new club and called it Liverpool FC. A week after the ending of Everton at Goodison, that Liverpool FC will be crowned English champions for a 20th time. Had that dispute been settled back then, there might never have been a Liverpool Football Club. Food for thought on this final day, but perhaps it would have sprung up elsewhere, maybe even at what would then have been an empty Goodison. But that twist of fate created the rivalry across Stanley Park, which has been at the epicentre of fascination with football, not just on Merseyside, but all around the world. At the current count, 246 official derbies, and the first was at Goodison in October 1894, a 3-0 home win. The most recent and the last at Goodison ended 2-2 with that explosive finish, which was surely worthy of the history. My first assignment there was April the 4th, 1975, just over 50 years ago. Everton against Burnley, played on a Friday night because Aintree hosted the Grand National on the Saturday. It finished 1-1. Bob Latchford, a true Everton number 9, put the Toffees in front. Peter Noble equalised for Burnley. I didn't need to look it up. It was the first time I'd ever commentated on a top-flight league game. Unforgettable. I was struck by the size and yet the intimacy of the steep-sided stadium. The noise. The crowd was just over 46,000, bigger than the capacity today. There was warmth and wit and a love of the game you could almost touch. In 1981, I joined Granada Television, and my debut game for the station was at Goodison Park. With far greater historical significance, it was Everton's first match under the management of Howard Kendall, who'd been an outstanding player at the club. Everton, with a raft of new signings by the new boss, beat Jim Smith's Birmingham City 3-1. Howard was on his way, and the Everton blue touch paper had been lit. A pathway to silverware was open. Among the trophies won was the European Cup Winners' Cup in 1985 in Rotterdam against Rapid Vienna, but only after a second-leg semi-final success against the mighty Bayern Munich. Everton returned from the away leg having banked a goalless draw, but Bayern went in front in the first half at Goodison Park. What happened after the break remains the most dramatic and atmospheric occasion I've experienced at the ground. Inspired by Scotland striker Andy Gray, Everton wrecked the great German club. Attacking the Gladys Street end, salvo after salvo attacks turned the tie on its head, sent the Toffees into the final, and Bayern back home stunned. It was a real football knockout job. Everton inspired, Bayern were battered. 3-1 the final score. The grand old stadium shook with the passion of the support, as it often did and still does when the victory holds special significance, like the 1-0 win over Manchester United 20 years ago, which I covered for Sky Sports. The talismanic Duncan Ferguson scored the goal. United ended with 9 men, Gary Neville and Paul Scholes, A-list red carders. Many of the games against Liverpool in my time have ended in red rather than blue celebration, but I caught the Danny Cadamartri derby in 1997. Danny just turned 18, scored in a 2-0 success. Opposing defender Neil Ruddock shook his hand when he was substituted, which was a nice touch amid the heat of the battle. Then there was the 3-0 victory in 2010, when Andrew Johnson scored twice. But my memories are more than just football. Like the Ice Bucket Challenge delivered on the side of the pitch by Roberto Martinez when he was the Everton manager. Luckily far enough from the kickoff for my brain to unfreeze in time. Then there was a match against West Ham in November 1987, the only time I've had to leave a commentary in the middle of a game. It was food poisoning from my pre-match lunch. Fortunately, the coverage was only for highlights, so when I explained my plight to the producer, he replied, "Don't worry, we'll put your voice on the missing part after the game is finished and you've recovered." Everton were 3 up at the time, and that was still the score when I managed to get back to the microphone. Within a couple of minutes, I was describing a West Ham consolation, and it finished 3-1. I was then told that nothing had happened during my enforced exit, so the retro commentary was not needed. I may well say a special farewell to the toilet area where I was able to save my dignity, one of the parts of Goodison that's not changed since then. Happily, the route to the Gantry has. It used to be a highly risky passage, a rite of passage for new commentators. It was the kind of task you had to complete to be fit for purpose. Up to the back of the top tier of the Bullins Road stand, which is opposite the Players' Tunnel. Through a door to a small platform actually outside the ground, up a rickety ladder, and then onto the roof. It was then a balancing act, particularly in wet or cold weather, across the roof to the top of a trapdoor. You then had to bang on the trapdoor to attract anyone who was already on the gantry to open up and let you in. That still involved shinning down another slippery sheer ladder, but it was always well worth the adventure, the best view in the Everton house. There'll be no problems with safety on May the 18th. It will be a very sentimental journey to the gantry for sure. To be honest with you, I'm more worried about the return trip. You can easily miss a step when you have tears in your eyes.
I've only got one question, but I have to ask, was the food poisoning from the press room pre-match?
No, Everton were not to blame. It was a restaurant where I wasn't the only one struck down by it. The crew, we used to have a meet at Granada times. We would meet up early, have a bit of a production meeting, have some food and go to the game. It was close to Goodison Park. I would say no more than that. It's still, I believe, in business. And so am I. So not too much harm was done.
It in the park?
No. Right. No. It wasn't. It wasn't something that I put it this way, Neil. I've not been back to where it is. I know exactly where it is.
Right. Okay. Fine. We move on to Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
And of course, Martin Tyler will bring the voice of reason. My voice of passion this week is about match intensity. I've gone on about this a lot, and I say that the reason the Premier League is the most popular league in the world is the intensity of games. And the reason now that teams are top teams is the intensity of their performance. So that Paris Saint-Germain and Barcelona and Inter Milan are matching the intensity of the top teams over here. And one of the things that has bored the pants off me this season, Chelsea at times, nowhere near all the time, is when you pass the ball around in your own half and, we're sucking the opposition in and we pass it back and if the manager says, if you go long, I'll drop you because that's the way we got to play. And I get that. But does he get the number of goals that we concede because we lose the ball in our own half? Oh, now, of course, the other side of that is you score a lot of goals winning the ball in the opposition half, because that's where your intensity is, in the pressing, and that's where the game is at the moment. But I watched Chelsea beat Liverpool recently with the most intense performance of this calendar year, probably. And was it better in every other element? Not really. It was better in intensity, and it made it so exciting. It was thrilling. I charge the following teams with losing their intensity: Manchester City, Arsenal as the season's gone on, Manchester United completely, Real Madrid out of Europe, not going to win the La Liga, probably not going to win anything. They've lost all their intensity. Intensity is what makes the game so exciting. It's what makes the game so passionate. If you lose that, you're done for.
You're right, and I'm supposed to be the voice of reason here. I'm the voice of passion with you alongside, because I believe in the same thing. I think successful teams are intense. I think Liverpool have shown that. Yeah. That's one of the qualities. You know, people say it's an average season, but Liverpool have been so far ahead of everybody else on most elements of football, but certainly with intensity, that's enabled them to play, to put all the patterns right and the tactical stuff right, because they've done it at a tempo. And passing the ball is fine, and we know it's a passing game, but pass with intensity, pass with tempo, pass quickly, pass forward.
One touch.
Yeah. Oh, Adam Wharton, by the way. He's the best one-touch player I've seen since Alan Ball.
No, he's not. Cole Palmer is, but he might be the second man.
I agree with Cole's very good as well. But that kind of, and that changes. That you can just see, you know, you don't need to be a football coach with badges and things like that just to see how it changes a game. The fans are lifted by the speed of it.
I interviewed Semenya, Bournemouth, last season after a game. I think it was against Tottenham, Bournemouth-Tottenham, and they just previously lost to Liverpool. And I asked him to compare the difference. He was playing on the right wing then. I asked him to compare the difference between playing against Tottenham and against Liverpool. And he said, for me, against Liverpool, you've just got to match Andy Robertson. You've got to be prepared to go up and down all day, because nobody goes up and down like him so often with such intensity. You've got to be prepared to do that, or he'll just run you into the ground. And that is one side of the game that you can't get away from. You can have all the skills, you might not be fast, but then you've got to, if you're not got pace, you've got to play with pace. You've got to early touches, early...
I think we're preaching to the converted. I don't think we've got an argument here. The argument is obviously some coaches believe in taking the heat out of the situation by keeping possession in your own half. And I, like you, when goals are conceded like that, I think it's madness. And I keep wishing I was playing now rather than 50 years ago, because as a forward, you'd be hunting down things you never got to hunt down. Went back to the goalkeeper, it was over your head, up to the halfway line and beyond, and you waited for the next ball to come up.
And you had to get back quick. That was the intensity. You had to get back quick or you'd be offside.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's... I believe that English football's always been the most watchable. It's now the most watchable with the ability. In the 70s and 80s, I was doing what we called round the world commentaries. It was always a game, a 3:00 kickoff on a Saturday that was never seen in this country, but was seen around the world. And it was so popular that it wasn't with the glamour of the Premier League. It was when grounds that are now 40, 50,000 capacity had 20,000 people in it, and it was not as commercially developed as it is today. It wasn't in any way to do with celebrity, if you like. So, but it was attractive because it was crash, bang, wallop. Yeah, a bit unsophisticated, but I'm delighted that the long throw is back in business again.
But I mean, Manchester City, we've seen the problems. Manchester United, the problems have been going on for a decade now, and for our Manchester United producers, will go on for another decade. But
they've won trophies in each of the last 2 seasons.
Yeah,
and they might win a trophy this season.
Yeah.
So I the way it's played, of course, you want the most dynamic team. You want to be the best team and win the best trophies. That doesn't work out like that. But I do think the slavish approach to a tactical philosophy does make it difficult. But if you believe in that, why not do it more dynamically? I mean, I'm not the first person to say this. There's some much more, if you like, A-list pundits than me, or observers than me, who've been saying the same thing about Manchester United. They know how they're going to play. Why can't they play it better? Because surely that's all they're doing at training, is working on the system, you know. But there's Bournemouth play with intensity, and you're quite right about that. When Forest and Palace, who I've seen recently, get the ball, they play with intensity, but they're also the best teams in the country probably without the ball, because their defensive shape is so good. So there is that part of it as well. But I don't think it's quite as bad as it was. It's almost as if this has been a passing phase, if you excuse the pun, a phase of passing, where people realise that, you know, and they I think you've made a very good point all through this series of having the crowd involved in the team, and obviously when Chelsea beat Liverpool, the crowd were very involved, and when I was at the semi-final, Palace beat Villa, fantastic crowd scenes. But recognising that is part of the problem you're identifying, really. If the game is up and atom, the crowd is up and atom. And we all want that within, of course, the behavioural grounds. We want everybody to be a bit more tribalistic than they have become, you know. And the tourism thing, if I was running a football club and had money invested in it, I'd want the tourists to come in, because I'd probably get on a daily basis or a match basis a better return than from the season ticket holders. But if you think that's the future, they'll run out of tourists long before. If you outlaw or isolate, make the home fans not feel wanted, you won't get them back. Yeah, then you'll get a few more tourists and maybe a few more money spent in the club shop. But look after your own first, and then the rest can have their place in the pecking order. And I hope that's also part. People are realising now the ticket prices issue is being discussed a lot, and rightly so, for loyal older supporters. We speak up for that particular section of society, and I do think it's linked. I hope you don't think I'm going off on a tangent here. The intensity comes from the supporters as well as the players, and we want it to be within, as I say, proper behavioural restrictions. We want it to be like it was before, with your word, is we are voicing passion here. Be passionate for your team, and as a footballer, you've got to be cool-headed as well. But you've got to play with your heart as well as your head, and that's what the fans want to see.
Said with intensity. But man, he's had a career out of saying things with intensity.
Well, I try. I think there's a lot of people ask me about what is the secret of being a commentator. Everybody has their own way of doing it, of course, but energy is the most important.
Yeah. A word used a lot in our profession.
It is.
Right. Thank you for listening, watching. Don't go away, because we have Stoppage Time.
Stoppage Time.
Right, just a little thing. We're coming to the end of the season, and for you, biggest surprise this season and biggest I thought so this season?
I'll do my biggest surprise, then you can do yours, and then I'll think about I thought so. I guess probably the appointment of Thomas Tuchel as the England manager. Nothing against Thomas. He's been a delight. He lived in the village where I lived for a little while he was still with Chelsea. But I can see the thinking behind it, and I'm not against it, but just surprised by it, really.
Yeah, I was surprised. I've got to say, I was surprised. My biggest surprise, the first league game I saw this season, champions Manchester City won 2-0 at Stamford Bridge, and I thought it was just going to be another season. So my biggest surprise is the way that they've fallen away. And I look at some of the people who played that day. Rico Lewis on the right wing. First time I'd seen Savinho. God, he was good for 45 minutes. And they just looked like they were going to roll on again, and they haven't. And I actually thought Arsenal would win the league this season. We have an Arsenal producer here as well, and I just indulge in his disappointment. But I am really surprised at the way Manchester City fell away so badly. That's been my biggest surprise. Biggest, I thought so.
There's a million, but Chelsea to beat Liverpool after Liverpool had celebrated winning the title.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I thought that would happen as well. My biggest is just the number of injuries following the Euros, Copa America, and just the whole schedule ever since COVID. I just think it's too much, and with the Club World Cup coming, and whether we've talked about Danny Carvajal, we've talked about Dean Ashton, we've talked about Julio Enciso, we've talked about, so you look at almost anyone that we're talking about today, just too many injuries, and I think it is worse now. Too many top players out, and I think too much is being asked of the players, and if that means they have to be paid a little bit less, so be it. Maybe too much is being paid to them as well. And on that note,
follow the money. That's been a lesson in all sorts of life, isn't it? Follow the money. Yeah. Follow the money trail.
Okay. For no money from Martin and me.
Absolutely true, by the way. And I'm sure many of you think we don't deserve any anyway. So. See ya.
Ta-ra. Hope you felt the passion, and then thank you for staying to the end. Don't forget, if you want to support us, subscribe. If you want to get more involved, have a look at the Patreon. And if you want to read us, you've got substack.com, where we're under the joy of football. Have a great week, and we're off to a European final. Is that right?
Not quite.